All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're happy today to have Dr. Adam Price, a nationally known clinical psychologist who's worked with adults and kids for over 30 years. And you may know him as the author of He's Not Lazy. Can you see that written the right way, Dr. Price?
Yep, looks good.
And his brand new book, which is a workbook, which is called the He's Not Lazy Guide to Better Grades and a Great Life.
Yes.
And that's for parents and teenage boys to do together, right?
Yes, mostly for teenage boys. It's a workbook, but there's also exercises for parents to do and for parents and teenagers to do together. Yes.
Right. And before we jump in, I just want to let our viewers know that we are going to be able to give away 5 copies of that new workbook. What you have to do to be eligible for that is to send an email to editor@yourteenmag.com. My colleague Jessica, I think, is on here. Jessica, can you put that email address for the giveaway into the comments here? And I'm sure Jessica will do that. If not, we'll put it in after. And also, if you're here watching, you can just pop in the comments with your son's ages or age. And you can also put questions in there. We'll try to get to some, but I know we have a lot to cover in a short period of time. Dr. Price, can we start by talking about the thinking from all your years of experience and your knowledge of the research? What do you mean when you say he's not lazy? I know a lot of us, I have a 16-year-old and son and some daughters. And I know a lot of us think, what's going on with our teenage boys? Are they lazy? Can you tell us what the thinking was? Why he's not lazy?
Absolutely. And Sharon, thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and to speak with your viewers. And, I'm a big fan of your teen media and all the things that you produce and that you do. It's really helpful to parents. So one of the myths that I try to bust is the idea that kids aren't achieving their potential. They're not working up to their potential, because I hear this a lot. And actually this feeds into, the kind of how I did the workbook. And so, I always ask, potential for what? And, when I'm speaking in front of, I haven't done it in a while, but in front of audiences of parents or educators, I say, who's achieved their potential today? And no one raises their hand, because potential is something we always want to strive for and achieve. So the idea that a teenager should be a certain way, sort of achieve a certain something, to me, in many ways, is a fallacy, because they're still growing and developing. And I think because of all the pressure that's on kids today, the anxiety that parents feel about getting into college, getting into the right college, we've lost track of the fact that so much of what kids are doing is really just developmentally appropriate. And we want to try to speed up the clock. We want to try to get our kids to mature faster, but we really can't. So in some ways, I think we end up robbing them of this really precious and important time that they have just to develop and grow. So that is why I think kids are not lazy. The second thing that I talk about a lot in the book is what happens when parents get too involved, when they push too hard, when they are more worried about their sons. And by the way, a lot of this applies to daughters also. I know you said you have some. When they are more worried about their son's grades than their son seems to be. And I also think that that's a fallacy too, because every kid I've talked to wants to do better in school. They may not admit it to their parents, and you don't necessarily see it in their behavior, but they want to do better. They have, internalized the values that their family has about education and moving forward. So what happens is parents and teens get stuck in this trap. I call it the paradoxical response, where it's kind of like the Chinese finger trap. The more that the parents, it's actually push, but in this analogy, it's pull. The more pressure that they put on, the less the kids have to, the less the kids want to, and so it becomes a battle not with the kid, not between themselves and how they're doing in school, but between them and the parent. Mm-hmm. Because what happens is, this is how ambivalence works. Ambivalence is where you have two sets of feelings. People think it means you have mixed feelings. You kind of want to do something, you kind of don't. It really means you have two sets of feelings. You want to eat the ice cream cone, and you don't. I don't know. Whenever I'm in that dilemma, I eat the ice cream cone, but you want to, and you don't. And so if there's two people involved, what happens is the ambivalence gets, one side gets shared by one person and the other by the other person, which seems like a kind of crazy concept, but if you've ever, been pregnant, or as I think most or all viewers in this situation have, or your spouse has been pregnant, that before that happens, there's this period where maybe the husband says, I'm ready to have a kid, and the wife says, oh no, I'm not ready yet, we have to do this and that. And as long as she continues to say she's not ready, the husband can just say, oh, that's great, let's do it. And I know this happened with my wife and I. As soon as the wife kind of says, oh, I think I'm ready, it's okay, we don't have to take that trip, we don't have to do this, all of a sudden the husband's like, wait a minute, whoa, now if it's really a possibility, I got to slow down, and it goes back and forth. So the same thing happens with a teenager and a parent about their homework, except the parent is taking the side of the, you do better in school, work your hardest. So then the teenager gets to have the side of their own mixed feelings. By the way, it's hard, what if I fail, in all caps, what if I fail, what if I fail. And so the parent is actually taking away, relieving the teenager of the opportunity to have that struggle inside themselves.
Right. It gives the parent the job of worrying about the kid.
Yes.
And their schoolwork and future. Now we have some folks commenting. Joy is saying she listened to the book on audio and it was a big help. Thank you. And we've heard that from a lot of folks in our teen audience. Every time we share about He's Not Lazy, we have so many parents saying this has been great. It helped me understand my teen. For those who are looking for a little more, how can the workbook be a part of helping our sons to move forward and getting their buy-in? Because this really, I know the book is for parents, the workbook is for parents and teens. How do we move to bringing our teen into this process and applying these principles and letting them run with them?
Well, thank you for asking that question, because it gives me the opportunity to answer it. And it's important. So first of all, in He's Not Lazy, I outline a plan for how parents can remove themselves from this struggle. And it's not just by letting teens do whatever they want. It's really not by, saying it's up to you, and if you make it, you do, and if you don't, you don't. It's about setting certain parameters, but then not engaging in a daily struggle or a daily monitoring. My philosophy is, teenagers have to pull the engine. It's their train, but parents have to keep them on track. So once parents have been able to extricate themselves from this battle, then the teenager has more. They may not do as well as we think they need to, but again, they're kids. So in the workbook, going back to that idea of achieving your potential, I was thinking about this because I wanted to. There's a few components to it, but basically I came up with an equation, and I was thinking, so what is this? What are the components of this equation that will lead to something good for teenagers? And what is the outcome? Because initially I thought the outcome is success, right? This plus this equals success. And then I thought, that's kind of falling into the trap of achieving your potential, because what is success? Who's defining it? When do you ever get there? And then it just hit me that what we really want our teenagers to be able to do is not to be successful. We want them to be able to take actions that they're proud of, for themselves. Of course, we're going to be proud of them. But I think it's much more motivating. And, I don't know if I'll have time, but, I did look a lot at the motivation literature, and not a lot of it applied to teens. But the biggest component of motivation is autonomy, right? The ability to make a decision for yourself. But autonomy doesn't necessarily, it's not the freedom to do whatever you want. It comes with accountability. This goes back to the previous conversation. But at any rate, so we want kids to have autonomy, and it's really hard to sometimes be motivated to do well in physics in high school when the teacher's boring and you don't understand why you're learning and it doesn't quite click with you. So we really want our kids to in life to figure out what makes them proud of themselves and to go for that. So that comes out of teenagers being aware of, and this is something I stress with my own patients in my practice, and I work with adults and kids, is what are your values? What values do you have? What are the things that you think are essential to have in your life? And you get to define it. And out of those values come goals, right? A value is the direction you're headed in. It's like direct going east. You never get to, well, I'm in New York, so I'll say go west. So, when you get to Cleveland, you're moving west, but that doesn't mean Cleveland is west. And by the way, I grew up in Cleveland.
I saw in the book that you were a Cleveland Indians fan.
Well, I grew up in Shaker Heights. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and a Browns fan, but we won't talk about that. But at any rate, but the goals are, I want to get to this point. I want to get to Cleveland because that takes me west. So it's helping there's a whole section in the book of helping teenagers to kind of figure out their values, and then to talk about that with parents and to compare notes, because they're not always the same. At any rate, so the components that lead to a kid being proud of themselves are accountability and capability. So capability plus accountability equals pride. And capability is really, I think what childhood and adolescence is all about is discovering what you're capable of. Hopefully as an adult too. Hopefully we grow and we're challenged, but we don't often learn new things as adults. We don't often take on a new thing that we're going to learn from scratch. We forget how hard that is. So for teenagers, it's about exploring. It's about trying new things. Some of them are going to work, some of them aren't, right? But it's about discovering what you're capable of. And in order to do that, you have to feel free to take risks. You can't have all this pressure on you to get, to be perfect at everything. I was just talking to a young man today who I had worked with. I'm working with him now as a young adult, but I worked with him in high school. And he was saying, he grew up being told that he can do whatever he wants. He's good at everything. And then when he got on the soccer pitch and he wasn't the best because he hadn't really worked at it, he gave up, right? And also that he felt like he had to be the best at something to feel good about himself, right? So that's robbing him of the opportunity to discover his capabilities,
right?
Let me just add real quick. And so, but also teenagers have to be able to hold themselves accountable. We all do. So in every chapter, at the end, there's tips for how, based on that chapter, a teenager can hold themselves accountable.
Right. I love that. And one of the things I really did appreciate about the workbook is your voice when you're talking to kids. I mean, it's no surprise since you spent decades working with kids that you had such a nice manner with teenagers that, respectful yet a leader. And I saw that you also had a panel of teens who helped you and gave you feedback on the book.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. First of all, I'm a recovering adolescent, so that helps me in terms of reaching. I had these 8 young men who, it was so much fun to work with them. They contributed stories of their own, or they read over things, and they just were so helpful and perceptive. And by the way, every one of them was unmotivated in high school or is an unmotivated teenager. So
yeah. And I have to say, when I was reading your book at home, the new workbook, I happened to run into my 16-year-old son who said, "What are you reading?" They see that he's not lazy. What is this? Is this about me? But I explained that it was a workbook, blah, blah. And he said, this is a quote. I wrote it down for you. Who wants to do a workbook in their spare time? So how do you go from, oh, this is a great idea, this is a great workbook, to how do I have the conversation with my son about like going through this book or setting aside time to do it, or should we be working with a teacher or professional when we're doing this? Like, how do you recommend parents go about actually introducing it to their kids?
Well, yeah, that's a great question, and it's really the challenge. I first of all, I tried to write it so it would be as engaging as possible, and so a teenager would want to turn the page. And I addressed it in the first few pages. You probably don't want to read this book, and I can understand why. And you want to put it under your bed, but just give it a chance, and you decide at the give them autonomy. You decide at the end of reading this first chapter if you want to read a second chapter. The second chapter is, well, the third chapter, I think, is a questionnaire about parent-child how you get along with your parent and how your parent gets along with you. And there's some really direct questions there that I think give a teenager an opportunity to, I pose the questions, the parents answer them, and the teenager gets to answer the questions, to communicate things that might be on their mind to the parent, or also to hear things. So I think that that's really a great way to start, because I think that will hook teenagers into thinking, oh wait, I have my parents' attention. Oh wait, I get to talk to them about these things. Oh wait, maybe they'll hear for that they're being too hard on me, or that I need some space. And so I kind of hope that that will happen. I do say kind of cheekily in the introduction that parents may need to offer a certain reward to get their son started, and I say it cheekily because that's not always the best way to motivate somebody. But it may help a little bit. But that's my belief that if kids start reading it, they'll want to continue, because there's a lot of good stuff in there. And
Yeah.
even if they don't do every worksheet, I think there's a lot of hands-on stuff about also about being more organized and setting goals.
Yeah. In reading it, I also thought it might be that, if you're the parent looking through it first, you might think, well, this chapter really responds to something my son is concerned about himself.
Mhm.
And maybe starting with that chapter, like, oh, you just might want to take a look at this one chapter on, overcoming procrastination. And then,
Mhm.
maybe since it's so engaging, he'll then turn to some of the other activities in the book too.
I think your kid, so you'll know what will work for them. To me, starting at the beginning is really the hook, because I'm explaining that this is a book for you.
Right.
It's a book for your goals. It's not a book, and it's not a book. The parents are involved not so that they can get more involved in their kids' work. It's actually to get them uninvolved, and I say that in the beginning. But if you think it works for your son, and I was worried about this, obviously, because I work with teenage boys. And so I
Mhm.
asked my panel, I said, read the first chapter and tell me, would you want to read this, or would you just not want to read it? And they all said they would continue. And I
Good.
said, don't tell me just to make me feel good, because, you don't have to do that. So we'll see.
Right. I have a question for you about, so parents, I know a lot of parents are thinking, if I stop pushing my kid so much, he's just not going to do what he needs to do. And every parent has a different definition of what needs to be done and what success looks like for their kid. What would you say if, this quote unquote tiger parents who intensely manage their kids' academics and activities, and it seems to work out. Their kid maybe gets into the college the parent wants them to, because the parent has pushed. Is there something missing there? Like, is there a reason why we should, even if it looks like success, that maybe there's a piece missing? Can you comment on that a little bit? Like, when we push and how whether it's working out or not, like we think it is.
Yeah, no, and I can tell you're asking these questions as a journalist, but also as a parent. Yeah, because it's really the heart of the matter. And by the way, I mean, I talk about helicopter parenting because it's easy, but I have empathy for parents. It's not that parents are out there just diabolically thinking that they need to make their kid into the best version of themselves, so that they can feel good about their kid. And I think parents are really worried, and I think they're
Mhm.
scared, and I think that of course we want the best for our children. And I think we know that it's competitive, and so I think the parents are coming from the right place. But what happens is, again, we rob the teenager of the ability to figure out how to do it for themselves, and how to figure out what they want for themselves. And um, so oftentimes when these kids get to college, not always, but oftentimes they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to do it on their own, and then their parents stay involved with that. And the parents are calling the dean, and then and it's well documented. Then parents are calling the boss at work. I mean, it's so kids never really get this opportunity to figure this out for themselves. And we don't at 18, we don't want our kid to be a mini executive who's ready to take on every challenge. We want our kid to have a belief in themselves that when they come up to challenges, they know how to accomplish them. And if they never have any challenges, they're never gonna be able to accomplish anything. A parent said to me the other day, and I hear this all the time. I grew up, my parents, this was a family where the parents were Holocaust survivors. The parents went through, incredible challenges just to survive. They grew up, without a lot, were successful, and now they've given a lot to their kids. And how come their kids aren't taking advantage of everything the way that, work as hard as their grandparents or they did? And I said, well, because they didn't grow up foraging for mushrooms and hiding from Nazis, which is
Right.
extreme. But they didn't grow up, without a whole lot. They grew up with everything. So it's very different. They don't have the same drive,
Right.
for better or worse. Obviously better that they're not having to go through what their grandparents went through. But so I think we have to allow kids to have challenges so that they have the confidence.
Great. Yeah, that's really helpful. I think our time's about up. I want to remind our viewers to either go out and purchase the book. It is available. It's been out for a couple of weeks now, Dr.
Yeah,
Price.
it's
Isn't
been
that
up for a
right?
couple weeks. Yep.
And also, if you want to enter for a chance to win a copy, email editor@yourteenmag. And any final thought you want to leave us with, Dr. Price? We're so appreciative of your time.
Yeah, I have a thought. My thought is to keep in mind and remember that parenting isn't a skill, it's a relationship. And if you trust the relationship, your son's going to be okay and you're going to be okay.
All right. That's a great thought to leave on.